It all started on an ordinary Saturday morning, coffee brewing, kids playing in the yard, when everything suddenly flipped upside down. My wife stepped outside to talk to one of the HOA officers about a minor notice we received, something about our mailbox being out of compliance. Nothing serious, but within minutes things got tense. Voices were raised, a crowd gathered, and then, without warning, she was being handcuffed on our front lawn, right in front of our kids. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife, one of the calmest, most respectful people I know, being treated like a criminal over a mailbox issue. I pulled out my phone and started filming. The neighborhood was in shock. Some were whispering, some were yelling, but then came the twist no one expected. Just 5 minutes after she was taken away, I got a phone call. It was the governor's office. At first, I thought it was a prank, but no, it was real. And the person on the line was *furious*. What happened next changed everything. The HOA, the local police, even our mayor got pulled into the storm. This story isn't just about one arrest. It's about power, overreach, and what happens when the wrong people get a little too comfortable with authority. And trust me, it only gets crazier from here. So here's the thing, this wasn't the first time our HOA had overstepped. For months, there'd been whispers around the neighborhood, random fines, notices that didn't make sense. A family down the block had to repaint their entire house because the shade of blue wasn't pre-approved. Another neighbor got written up for having too many potted plants. But we all kind of just dealt with it, figuring it was better not to stir the pot. Until now. My wife had been calmly asking for clarification, just trying to understand why we were being threatened with penalties over something as minor as a mailbox post. That's when one of the HOA officers, who also happened to be a retired local law enforcement volunteer, started escalating the situation. Within minutes, it turned into a scene. He claimed she was being uncooperative, and suddenly 2 more guys from the HOA security team showed up. That's when they took her. People were recording. Some were shouting that it was out of line. And honestly, it felt surreal, like it couldn't be happening in our own quiet neighborhood. But when the governor's call came through, that's when I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. There was more to this than anyone realized. Why was the governor involved? What did he know that we didn't? Something wasn't adding up. After the call from the governor's office, everything felt different. The voice on the other end was calm but sharp. He asked me to explain what happened, then told me to stay put and not speak to anyone else until someone from his team arrived. No other explanation, just that. Meanwhile, my wife was still at the local precinct, being questioned over non-compliance and disorderly conduct. But according to the footage from 3 different neighbors, she hadn't raised her voice once. The videos were already circulating in local Facebook groups, and people were starting to talk. Comments like *this HOA has gone too far*, and *we've let this happen for too long* started popping up. Some folks even admitted they'd been warned not to speak out about HOA practices or they'd regret it. That's when the pieces started falling into place. A friend of mine who used to work in city planning texted me, saying this wasn't the first complaint about this HOA, but every time someone tried to take it further, the case got quietly closed. Then there was the rumor that the HOA president had family in high places. One of them supposedly worked in zoning enforcement, and another had ties to campaign donors. But why did the governor care? And why now? Something told me we were just scratching the surface. By the time the governor's liaison pulled up to our house, a black SUV, government plates, tinted windows, the street was packed. News vans had started showing up. Neighbors stood on their porches, whispering, recording. Some people looked scared. Others looked fired up, like they'd finally had enough. The man who got out didn't waste time. He flashed a badge, asked to see the HOA notice, then requested a copy of the video footage. He barely reacted as he watched it, just nodded slowly, jaw tight. Then he asked me a strange question. Has anyone from the HOA ever entered your property without permission? I paused, thinking back. A couple times, we'd noticed things moved around in our yard, plant pots, tools. But we never thought much of it. He just nodded again, like that confirmed something. While this was happening, I got a call from a neighbor I barely knew. She was older, quiet, kept to herself. She told me her late husband once tried to file a formal complaint against the HOA and was hit with a surprise lion on their home just weeks later. She said he dropped it out of fear they'd lose the house. That same lion company. Turns out it was owned by a shell corporation tied to the HOA president's cousin. And then my phone rang again. It was my wife. Only this time, she wasn't calling from the precinct. I answered the call, heart racing, expecting to hear stress or confusion in my wife's voice. But what I heard was something else. Urgency, fear, and something that didn't sit right. She whispered, "I'm not at the precinct." They moved me. I froze. "What do you mean *moved *you?" I asked. She said 2 men, dressed like officers but without name tags or badges, had shown up at the station and said she was being transferred for processing. But she never saw any paperwork. No one explained anything. Now she was sitting in an unmarked building on the edge of town, no windows, no sign out front, and she wasn't allowed to call me until now. My blood ran cold. I put the call on speaker for the governor's liaison to hear. His expression changed instantly. He got on his radio and started rattling off codes I'd never heard before. At the same time, a neighbor ran up to me with a stack of papers she'd just printed, documents showing the HOA had been quietly approving permits for construction projects that bypassed city review. The kicker? Some of those permits were stamped with digital signatures that supposedly belonged to state officials, one of which was the governor's own name. Now everything made sense. Why the call came, why they were furious, and why this couldn't just disappear. But the question was, how deep did this go? And could we stop it in time? The SUV peeled out of our driveway, heading straight toward the building where my wife said she was being held. The governor's liaison didn't wait for backup. He said every second counted. I was left standing there, holding onto the phone with a shaky hand, listening to her breathe on the other end. Then the line cut, just static. About 20 minutes later, another call came in, this time from the liaison himself. "We've got her," he said. "She's safe." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. He told me they found her in a private security facility, owned by a contractor with past ties to the HOA president's family business. No legal transfer, no oversight, just her alone in a locked room. While that was happening, the documents my neighbor printed were already in the governor's hands. Within hours, a task force had been assembled. Subpoenas were being issued. By sunset, local news stations were airing footage of the arrest and the documents. The HOA office was shut down for emergency investigation. But just when I thought it was over, one final twist landed. A week later, we got a letter, not from the HOA, but from a private law firm. It said we were being sued, not for damages, but for *defamation*. Turns out, someone still wanted this buried, and they weren't done with us yet. The lawsuit didn't hold. Within days, the governor's office issued a public statement confirming an investigation into the HOA's activities. Turns out, several families had been quietly threatened or harassed into silence over the past few years. But once our story went public, more people stepped forward. Whistleblowers, former board members, even city workers, all with pieces of the puzzle. The house of cards collapsed fast. The HOA president resigned, the private security firm was shut down, and the local police department launched a review of all arrests connected to HOA complaints. As for us, we got a formal apology from the state and assurances that new legislation would prevent anything like this from happening again. My wife is still recovering from the shock of it all, but she's strong. And now she's speaking out. She's working with a group pushing for HOA reform across the state. What started as a bizarre, terrifying day turned into something bigger. A wake-up call about unchecked power and the importance of standing up, even when it's uncomfortable. So if you ever feel like you're the only one pushing back, remember this: you're probably not alone. And sometimes the truth just needs one voice to break through the silence.